Hey everybody, what's up? Gonna run through the Sunday slate. This is gonna be the main slate. I am using FanDuel to look over everything, but of course the stats translate pretty well over to DraftKings. Obviously, a different format on DraftKings as far as what players you can pick. You can pick like 3 centers over there, and here of course you got 1 center. Anyways, these are some good picks, I would say. I'm not just going to talk about like the good picks. I'm just going to kind of give you a breakdown of how things are looking, because with a 4-game slate, it really helps to do some research. I've done about 5 hours, maybe a little less than that, of research on this slate already. So pending any finalizations of the injury report, there's going to be some good value picks tomorrow. So speaking of the injury report, let me just kind of break it down. Obviously, you can see here Kawhi, he's been out. I feel like he's only played a few games. Yeah, you look over here, he's played 9 games this season, so he's been out. As far as the other injuries, Lonzo Ball is questionable, and Willie Cauley-Stein on the Sacramento Kings is out. Very important. He gets a lot of fantasy points, so you could probably find some good picks there. I'll talk about that more in a second. JJ Redick is questionable on the Philadelphia 76ers. Reggie Jackson over on Detroit is still out. Dwayne Wade is day-to-day. I would say he's probable. It looked like he had some sort of issue with the Pacers coach, and that's why he didn't play. I don't know what's going on. Rudy Gay is out still. Andre Robertson's kind of the new situation on the Thunder. He's out. Ginobili's questionable. He might come back in, which might affect some picks a little bit. Frank Mason is out on the Kings. He's kind of a 15 fantasy point per game player. He's out, so maybe those 15 per game go somewhere else. And Bayless is out, who is also kind of a lower fantasy point per game player. So that's the injury report. Out of all those injuries, I think the most affected team would probably be Sacramento with Cauley-Stein out, and then Frank Mason. So if you're looking for a value pick and increased productivity, Scal, Labissiere, Costa Kufos, and Zach Randolph. So I checked out when Cauley-Stein was last out, when he last sat on the bench, and it looked like there were 3 games all in which Randolph was getting almost 50 fantasy points. So that could definitely be a huge pick tomorrow. Keep that in mind. He's at 5,100. If we look and try and find him. Yeah, so Zach Randolph, 5,100, and I'll show you real quick what I was talking about. So these games on the very bottom right here are when Cauley-Stein was out. And if you look at the numbers, 34, 54, 48. Now if he gets 34, you're talking almost 7 value. 53, you're talking almost 11 value. And 48 is almost 10 value. So he could be a huge pick tomorrow. Then again, you look at his minutes more recently. So I like that a lot. I think I'm going to have at least one line with Randolph in it. Second team that's dealing with injuries where you might be able to pick up some value would be the Spurs. Rudy Gay is out. Ginobili's questionable. And we've seen this guy Davis Bertans, who's this one right here. He has been picking up some points. His salary was a lot lower. They raised it to 44. Consistent 20 plus when he's been getting minutes. I think he's more of like a safer value pick. Maybe get you 5 or 6. And you can be happy with that if you're low on salary in that position and you need to get someone consistent. Not a lot of pop-off potential, but still 5x is 5x. That's usually going to get you in the top 20% if your whole line does that. So definitely a good spot. Philadelphia's got some injury issues with JJ questionable, Bayless out, maybe Cabaret. TJ McConnell I think is good as well as Dario and Rocco. They might get you some value. The players I'm talking about, of course, would be, where is he at? So Dario Saric, Robert Covington, and TJ McConnell. These kind of 3 middle guys I would target. And, of course, you can't forget about Ben Simmons, but he's Ben Simmons, so he can do it. He can get you 65 or he can get you 30. I like that. Anyways, Oklahoma with Robertson out. He's getting 18 fantasy points per game. Look for probably one of the big 3 to pick up his slack. If not, maybe Terrence Ferguson. I'm not sure. Terrence Ferguson is a pretty cheap player. See if I can find him. He's probably so cheap. Let's do this by that. Probably easier to find him. See how hard of a time I am? There he is. Okay, he's getting 6 fantasy points per game, but you look more recently. You know, he might get some more minutes, but even when he gets 27 minutes, he gets like half a fantasy point per minute. Not really, you know, that's just kind of what the injury report said, was to look for Ferguson, but I'm not about that. Lakers have Lonzo questionable. If Lonzo's out, maybe target Clarkson or KCP. Even with Clarkson's price, KCP might go off, but there's a lot of value always in the Lakers, regardless of injury. Cavaliers, Dwayne Wade, like I said, he's probable. If he doesn't play, look for J.R. Smith, I think, more so than anyone. Even though the injury report says to go for Crowder or Green, I like J.R. Smith. If you look at J.R. Smith real quick, let's just do that really quickly. Oh, I clicked the wrong one. Okay, so J.R. Smith, that's Ish Smith. Boom, he had 34, I think. Yeah, 34 with Dwayne Wade out, 37 minutes, and he's minimum price. So keep an eye out if Dwayne's out. You might just want to snag him. 34 is a pretty big number. That's 10x, so keep an eye on that. That just about wraps up the injury report. Moving on to the close games. So Sunday slate, we're going to ignore these 3. It's just these 4 games right here. Pistons, Cavaliers, I would say the closest game would be the one on ESPN, which is 76ers and Thunder. Not a lot of these games have like close teams. If you look at the line, -10, -4, -9, -7. So I like 76ers Thunder, and then I actually think Lakers Toronto will be a closer game than any of these two, just because the Lakers are 8-2 in their last 10 games. I think the Raptors are like 5-5 or something. So I would put this closer than these two. So I would say this is closer than this. And then this would be the third place in close games. And the reason I go over the close games is because they're generally more competitive. Maybe the starters get more play. And then I think the Sacramento-San Antonio game will be the least close. Sacramento's been a little bit surprising recently, so keep an eye out on that. And as far as my ranking in how close the games are, with this one in first, second, third, fourth, it's also the same in high scoring. I think this game will be the highest scoring, then this one, then this one, then this one. As you can see, 213, 218, they're all kind of close, but I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, just like the close rating. I think Oklahoma has decent blowout potential. So maybe target like Philly players more so. Obviously Westbrook's pretty good pick. Not a lot of places to put your salary tomorrow. Center, there's a good amount of places. PF, you got Ben Simmons as the only option over 7,000. Never mind. Okay, we got LaMarcus Aldridge and Ben Simmons, and then here, LeBron, Paul George, only options over 7,000, and then DeMar. Shooting guards is sketchy. Russell Westbrook. So there's not a lot of options. 4-game slate. That's how it goes. So watch out. I mean, it is on TV. Philly's gonna probably try. You could also see Ben Simmons. You know, he kind of got snubbed, so maybe he pops off more so. You know, didn't get picked onto the starters or whatever. So Lakers, I think same thing as Philly. I think if you pinpoint the Laker fantasy points, you're going to have a good time. And I've already kind of discussed what Zach Randolph did last time Cauley-Stein was out, so watch out for that. Yeah, and like I've said before as well, Oklahoma with Andre out, maybe one of these big 3, Westbrook, Carmelo, and Paul George. One of these might be a requirement on your line. If I had to pick between the 3, I'm more likely to say Paul George or Westbrook than Carmelo. Carmelo, he's kind of been underperforming when I have him, so just kind of my bias. I'm going to talk really quickly about out of these 8 teams, 3 of them are either on the first game or second game of a back-to-back, which can affect production. Philadelphia is on their first game of a back-to-back. They have another game tomorrow, Monday, and Oklahoma is on game 2 of a back-to-back. And Detroit is also on game 2 of a back-to-back. So be careful with the back-to-backs. Make sure you check your minutes when you make your final picks. Okay, so I'm going to go over the highest fantasy points total. So that just means, you know, we talk a lot about value. About, you know, like if he's 12,000. My value minimum on a player that I look for is 5 value. So Westbrook would need 60,000. I mean, not 60,000. 60 fantasy points, right? That's what I want out of Westbrook. If he gets me 50, I'm not happy, which I know sounds insane, but it's Westbrook. If he gets me 72, I'm really happy. If he gets me anything over that, I'm really happy. LeBron James' price has gone down after his, as you can see here, 30-30, 30-30. He's a little sketchy. He's not on a back-to-back. Doesn't play on Monday, so might be a good pick. Anyways, so this part I'm just going to talk about out of all the people in point guard, who's going to get the most fantasy points. Kind of obvious, it's Westbrook. Second place, I go Kyle Lowry. Third place, surprisingly, I go all the way down here to DeJounte Murray against the Kings. DeJounte had a 50-plus fantasy point performance. Not that one, this one. Against Cleveland. He's been doing a lot, kind of getting a bigger role. He dropped 30 against Sacramento last time, and that was, by the way, it was in 18 minutes. So if you see him get 30 minutes against Sacramento, I could see him getting 40, 45. That's why I rank him as my third best point guard as far as overall fantasy points. Then I kind of struggled with this one. I think they're all kind of close, but I went with Ish in fourth place. Fantasy points, he's pretty consistently doing 20 to 40. Next up, I would go with Mr. TJ McConnell. You got some outs. Whether JJ plays or not, I think he's still a good pick. With you have at least, Bayless is out. That's 14 fantasy points. We know what TJ can do. It might need him to go off against the Thunder. It might happen. So I put him. And then to round out my top point guards, I would go Mr. Fox, Mr. Foxy. I wonder if he's related to Rick Fox. Does anybody know that? Comment. Let me know. Anyways, he can get you 30, 35, 40. More likely to get you 20, 25, 30. Moving on to shooting guards, I would go first place DeRozan. Kind of obvious. You have a huge drop. Second place would be Clarkson. Especially if Lonzo's out. Maybe less so if Lonzo's in. And then I go to Buddy Hield. If you look at Buddy Hield recently, he got a big price uptick. And then you look at his last 4 or 5 games, averaging almost 30 fantasy points per game. Pretty good on 5,900, even with the price increases. My next pick in this position would be Bogdanovich. Yeah, Bogdanovich has been putting up really nice numbers recently. You would assume that only goes up with the Cauley-Stein being out, right? And then after Bogdan, I go KCP, Caldwell Pope. And lastly, Avery Bradley, who's been sketching me out recently, so I'm not too excited about how he's doing. Small forwards, first place, LeBron James. Second place, Paul George, in overall fantasy points. And I like Paul George tomorrow. He's kind of back-to-back proof, and they're on a game 2, so Paul George, and then Brandon Ingram. Then I'd go to Kyle Anderson. And if Lonzo plays, you have to keep in mind you're going to lose value in a lot of these Lakers. But Anderson and Rocco would be to round out my power forwards. I put Simmons above LaMarcus. I think they might want some rest for LaMarcus. Getting deeper into the season with Kawhi not looking too good. But keep in mind LaMarcus is LaMarcus. Dropped 49 against Sacramento last time. But this kind of scares me, the 23. Maybe it was just an off day for him. I definitely think it's very possible LaMarcus is your top pick here in production over Ben Simmons. But I like Ben Simmons more as my first place. So it goes Simmons, LaMarcus, and then I go actually to Kuzma. If Lonzo plays, I would go to Tobias. And then actually Zach Randolph. I've talked about him already in the show. So keep an eye on him. Definitely keep an eye on him. We already know as of now, Cauley-Stein is out. Zach Randolph is one of their biggest, tallest dogs. He can get the job done. Yeah, he's old, but he's shown this season he can drop big minutes and get you 50 fantasy points. I think he'll probably be high owned tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. Anybody that does their research that says, okay, so with Cauley-Stein out, who do I want? You know, who do I get? Who's gonna get those points? Last time, you know, at the bottom of the slate, like I showed already, it was Randolph, right? He got over 30 minutes in 3 contests that he was that Cauley-Stein was out. 34, 54, 48. I know it's against San Antonio. San Antonio hasn't been doing the best recently. And then, you know, you look at the last time they played San Antonio, he only got 18. I think there's 2 in here. Yeah, so this one, 31 minutes, 23. You can't be too mad at even if he does that, right? If he gets you 20 or 22, you're only losing a couple points on your valuation. Besides Zach Randolph at power forward, I would go Dario Saric on the Sixers. Carmelo maybe if you want to be a little more risky. And then Ibaka, I like Ibaka against the Lakers. He's pretty consistent, but you remember the time not too long ago where these were his kind of numbers, right? 48, 28, 34, 40. At that price, that's good. He's capable of getting you, I think, up to 10 value. So keep an eye on him. He might be swatting the Lakers down left and right. Final position, we have center. Kind of tough to pick between Drummond and Embiid. I think Drummond is on a tear with the snubbing. Drummond is on day 2 of a back-to-back, so keep that in mind with your decisions. But as far as my research shows, it doesn't look like he really gets affected too much by back-to-backs. Alright, so if we just look at a couple examples, Atlanta, next day he played Indiana, 1 more minute, still 50 fantasy points. Yeah, so just, you know, keep an eye on everything. And then Reggie Jackson's out, if that might affect things a little bit, maybe he gets more scoring. And Drummond against good teams, right? So Drummond got snubbed for the All-Star, we all kind of know that. And he's against Big Daddy Braun, #1 All-Star, right? He's the face of the All-Star situation. So he might just want to beat that face up with some blocks and some steals and maybe 50 fucking points, 30 rebounds. Maybe he gets 150. Maybe he gets 100. That's my ceiling on Drummond. 15x tomorrow. Just kidding. So I go Drummond #1, then Embiid, then K-Love. K-Love is Kevin Love. I think if it's competitive, Kevin Love, we've all seen the kind of stuff he can do. He can get you 35, 40, 50. You know, he can get there. More recently, it's been a little lackluster, but I still think he's got the potential. After Drummond, Embiid, and K-Love, I actually go all the way down here to Valun Chinchilla. I don't know how to say it. You look at his last 2, 47, 61. He's only 5,700, by the way. So definitely a 10x situation, maybe a tournament winner, right? If you're looking for a nice 100,000, 50,000, whatever you want, right? Besides Valencia, I go Randall, then I go over to Adams, and after Adams, I go Powell. Powell against Sack, maybe he pops off, maybe he gets 40 for you, but I don't know about the 6,400 price. He's got to get 32. He can definitely do it. Okay, so that's you know, a breakdown of all of these spots, and over the past 5 or 10 minutes, we've been talking about highest fantasy point production. So the final segment I'm just going to jump into really quickly is the value picks, okay? So value picks are always important because if you want to go, like let's say you go Westbrook, LeBron, you snag Drummond, and you want Ben Simmons, right? All of a sudden, whoa, you're at 3,500 remaining and you got 5 players to pick, right? That can happen when you're doing your line. So what we're going to do is we're going to check out some value picks. All right, so the first one I want to look at, I think there's a good amount of value on Toronto, right? So if we look at DeLon Wright, if it is kind of a blowout situation and he's taking a lot of minutes, he's had games where he goes 30, 33, 31 pretty consistently. Seems like once a week he'll get 30 fantasy points. If he does that at 4,300, you're looking at 6, 7 value. I give DeLon a 4x to 14x value, which means I think his fantasy points will be like between I think his fantasy points will be between maybe 15 and 58 tomorrow. If you look at this game versus Chicago, he got 60, 29 minutes. That's, if it's a blowout, Toronto's got a huge lead and they just want to get some minutes on him. Could be a good pick. Other Toronto, you know what Van Vliet can do, right? If you've been paying attention, Van Vliet can get you there. He's only 4,500. He just dropped 50 against Atlanta. It's really hard to tell with the Toronto picks. There's not really any injuries holding Toronto players back where they need a reliable bench. But if it's a blowout, either way, I think you're going to get minutes out of him. But if it's a blowout, especially by Toronto, which most people would predict it would be because it's Toronto versus the Lakers. I've been so surprised by the Lakers. They really like to show off, their high energy, their paint production. So just be careful. Also, we kind of got to go over this guy just because I've been picking him every now and then, and he's been doing all right. Raymond Felton, he's pretty much minimum price. You want 18 out of him. He's got some 24 bombs. Andre's out, so maybe he gets more minutes than 13. He can get you well over 1 fantasy point per minute. If you're in a situation where you need a point guard and you've only got 3,600, can't go wrong, I think, with Felton. If you need to do that, value out of San Antonio. There's got to be some, right? So obviously Zach Randolph, keep an eye on him. Let's kind of talk about Patty. So Patty's had big games. He's only 3,900. He dropped 39 at Brooklyn. It could be one of those days for him. Just keep an eye on him. And we're going to jump right back over to Toronto really quickly. I just want to go over Pascal. Pascal might be a good pick. I don't know. Kind of sketchy, but I think blowout potential. I think it could happen. And then CJ Miles. CJ Miles is like a three-point shooter. He knows how to get to the foul line on him, too. He's got a couple of 25-30 situations. He's really cheap. Not a horrible option. So one of the options, I'm just going to kind of finish off with... Let's do four more value picks, starting with Bertans. I think I've already kind of talked about Bertans. You look at his game log. He's been getting some production. And as far as I've seen, it's kind of due to Rudy Gay. So he's been getting some production. The more exciting value picks, I think people might sleep on Reggie Bullock. He has been super consistent when he plays, right? 30, maybe not so super consistent, but for his price, right? 30. I think it's a back-to-back too for the Pistons, and I think they might want him to do it for him, right? If you look at his back-to-backs, he kind of does well on back-to-backs. It looks like they go to him pretty often, 23 to 33. His points seem to increase on a back-to-back. That obviously doesn't mean it's guaranteed to increase, but if he's getting 33 minutes, you're going to be happy. So keep an eye on Bullock. I'm also going to just kind of... This is definitely Dwayne Wade dependent, but Jay Crowder. I've had some good days with Jay Crowder. He can get you 30. He can get you 30. And for 3,700, that's not too bad. I definitely think for a tournament line, you don't want to have too many value players because it just makes things so unlikely. Like, it's unlikely that you're going to have 3 sub 4K players getting you 30 fantasy points, right? Okay, so the very last, I'm kind of saving the best for last here, and that would be Kostakufos, right? Kostakufos with Mr. Kallistein out. I like it, I like it. I can't even find the guy. Where did he go? There he is. He's been doing some good stuff. His price is super low, right? So if you just look at his game log, right? So stick with me here, right? Here are the games when Kallistein was out. 18, 16, 16. Not too good. But then for some reason, Kallistein comes back in. His minutes go up. His production goes up. He's had a 40-point game. I know it's against San Antonio, right? But, 15 against the last time they played. And that was with Kallistein in the game. I think tomorrow with Kallistein out, his minutes will be over 20. And I think he has the potential to get 10 value. I really like him tomorrow. Although I will say this, I think it's gonna be tough to pick him over all of the awesome center picks, right? Embiid, Drummond, even Valun Chinchilla, right? You look at Valun Chinchilla, his log speaks for itself. Anyways, that about wraps up the 4-game slate for Sunday, January 28th, right? Be safe with your picking. If you get a little bit crazy, just remember that, this entry counts. You got to be safe. Do you want the 50,000? You want a brand new car or a nice jacuzzi and, whatever you want to spend it on. Okay, make sure you just make sure you pay your taxes and make sure you hit me with a nice little thanks, bro, in the comments. I really appreciate that. Anyways, guys, have a safe trip in your fantasy world, and check back here tomorrow. Every day I'm going to try and get this uploaded. Sometimes it'll be with my buddy. So, yeah, just be safe out there. Okay, guys. Peace.